Hello and welcome to the Silver Stripe screencast. In this tutorial we're going to talk about adding non-database content to our templates. So just a bit about what we'll cover here. We are going to just generally discuss what we're working towards here. This might seem like kind of a foreign topic to you. It's kind of an obscure title, so we'll explain all that. And then we will update the template and sort of work backwards and start with where we want to be and then retrofit into the controller so that we get what we want. And lastly, we will update the controller to use generic data. So what are we doing here? Well, up until now, the data on our templates has been pretty one-sided. It's sourced from the database and we render the fields from one or many returned records on the template. Oftentimes, however, the template and the database are not so tightly coupled. There's actually no rule saying that all template data has to come from the database. Ultimately, what we're teaching in this lesson is the concept of composable UI elements. As you may know, composable components are a rapidly accelerating trend in application development as developers and designers seek to maintain a high level of agility and reusability in their code. So being composable, these components are essentially dumb, and they only really know how to do one thing, which is render some UI based on the configuration that has been passed to them. That configuration that we pass to them is what we call composition. So in the context of our project, we'll be lighting up the search filter toggle buttons in the sidebar of our property search page. And the purpose of these buttons is to show the user what search filters have been applied, and we will offer an option to remove them and refresh the search page without that filter applied. So let's start by working backwards and we'll update the template. A lot of developers, including myself, find it much easier to work backwards with problems like this. And that means starting from the template and adding the back end afterward. So let's look at these filter buttons and try to abstract them into something we can use. As you can see, they're all statically contained in a UL tag at the moment. We've got the New York residential filter, the number of bedrooms, the price, etc. So one approach that may come to mind is to use a long series of display logic to output all the possible options like this. So we could say, if location filter, do this, and then we will display the location filter as a label. If bedroom filter, do this, and then we have to show them the text for bedroom filter and the number of bedrooms. This might look reasonable at first, but I can tell you it's going to lead to nothing but problems. There are a number of things wrong with this approach. First of all, it pollutes your template with syntax. And it's a lot of repeated markup, right? Every single time we have one of these conditions, we got to write another li tag that has the same class and the same span and the same href and the same class on the a tag, etc. It also pollutes your controller with a lot of repetitive property assignments and or methods, whatever you're using to determine if location filter. That's something that the controller needs to know about, so that's no good. And it also creates more parity between your controller and your template. If you ever want to add or remove a new search option, you have to remember to update the template as well. That makes life a little difficult. It's just one more thing to maintain. Lastly, we have to repurpose the value of the filter as its label. So here we're saying $bedroom filter space bedrooms. At some point, that's just not going to work. Search filters are often not human readable. It might be an ID, for instance, and that's just no good. We'd have to create, one variable for the filter itself and another one for the label. I mean, that's just getting kind of annoying. So you can see where this is leading. I'm going to show you a better approach. If the sight of li tags nested in a UL is becoming almost synonymous with the loop control, that is a good sign. You're on the right track here. We are definitely going to need a loop here. This will keep the UI much cleaner and will give us more control over the output as we'll have a chance to compose each member of the loop. So let's add that now and make up the rest as we go. So I'm going to say loop active filters. And hopefully this makes sense so far. Again, we're working backwards, so the active filters piece is merely semantic right now. Now let's just go through and brainstorm some property names for the dynamic content. So we'll add the properties $label and $remove link, which we can assume are the only two distinguishing traits of each filter button. So now that all of our template syntax is in place, we need to configure the controller to feed this data to the template. Now we could write a new method called active filters or get active filters that inspects the request and returns something. But given that there's only one endpoint for our search page, I think it makes more sense at this point in the project to create the filter UI elements as they're being applied to the list. So that's just another way of saying that we're still going to be using the index method to create this list for now. In order to invoke the loop block, we of course are going to need some kind of iteratable list. So far, we've been using data list, which represents a list of records associated with a database query. Since our filter UI elements are not coming from the database, we will need something more primitive. In this case, array list is an ideal choice. So at the top of our index action, let's instantiate that list. We'll say filters equals array list create. Now you can probably guess that array list is just an array of data. So now we just need to fill our list with data. And to populate this list, we'll revisit our old friend viewable data from the previous tutorial. Now just as a recap, viewable data is a primitive object that is ready to be rendered on a template. One type of viewable data is data object, which we've been using all along to render content from the database. You will rarely need to use the viewable data class itself, but its immediate descendant array data is very flexible and it couldn't be simpler to implement. It's basically just a glorified array. All you have to do is instantiate it with an array of key value pairs, and those key value pairs translate to $variable, template variables, and they will render their associated values. So let's add the filter UI button for the keywords filter. So in this condition where I check for search, using the push method on the array list, we can add an array data object to it, and each one is going to have a label and a remove link, as required by the template. The remove link property implements this obscure utility method from the HTTP helper class. It's not too important to know about this right now, but it is quite nice. You might find yourself in a situation where you want to use this. All it does is it takes the current URI and it sets a given query parameter to a given value. In this case, we're setting it to null to effectively remove the filter. The next filter is for the availability date range. It actually doesn't offer a whole lot of utility to the user to display this as a toggleable filter, especially since it's actually a composite filter of the arrival date and the number of nights. So we're going to skip this one. I don't see any reason to add that. The next several are pretty straightforward, so let's add the filter UI elements for bedrooms, bathrooms, and the min-max price. So in the bedrooms condition, I'm going to add one with a label $bedrooms and add its remove link, and then we'll do the same for bathrooms. And next we'll do min price. And this is all getting pretty repetitive, as you can see. Lastly, we do max price. Now somehow we need to get this $filters array list to the template. Just like our custom variable results, we are going to pass the active filters list to the template through an array. Now if you remember, we called the loop active filters, so that's what we need to name it. So I'm just going to go into this data array, and right under results we'll just add active filters and we'll pass it filters. And now we get to reload the page, and you should have some working filter buttons now. So let's give this a try. Toggle some of these and see that it's refreshing the page without the filter. Everything seems to be working correctly. All right, thank you for tuning in to this lesson on adding arbitrary data to your templates. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below.